Your taxes are due Wednesday, just so you know. I'm Shirley Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was a gut-wrenching loss for the Badgers in the national championship game, a rocky start for the Brewers season, and that was a shock. Local community leader and former Marquette star Mark Murata dies at the age of 52. Guilty verdicts for the Boston Marathon bomber. A police shooting in South Carolina is captured on video, and the cop is charged with murder. A Madison man is arrested after he tries to join ISIS. Waukesha County gets a new county executive, Paul Farrow. And in Milwaukee, the murder rate is 3 times what it was last year. But first, the state's chief justice is going to court to keep her job no matter what the voters just said. Now, how about this for a dysfunctional high court? The state's chief justice, Shirley Abrahamson, is suing her 6 fellow justices and the state to block them from holding a vote that might demote her to a mere justice. Last Tuesday, state voters gave final approval to a state constitutional amendment that changes the way the chief justice is chosen. Until now, the most senior justice became chief automatically. Abrahamson has been chief justice since 1996. Under the amendment, the justices themselves will get to pick the chief, and they were expected to replace the 81-year-old Abrahamson. She didn't wait long, filing a lawsuit in federal court saying that she was constitutionally entitled to her job. A federal judge refused to block the new amendment, but the suit stays alive. Joining me on our panel this morning, defense attorney Dan Adams, the managing editor of WriteWisconsin.com, Colin Roth, political strategist Linda Bruin, and communications consultant Brian Fraley. You said on my radio show, Brian, that you were not surprised that Shirley Abrahamson sued. I was surprised. I didn't think she would do it.
She's a Wisconsin liberal. When you want to defy the will of the people, you go to court and do your best. And then when you lose, you eventually accept it, and will eventually accept it in a few months when this gets resolved.
You think she's going to lose this lawsuit?
She's going to lose.
Okay, Dan Adams, you're actually the lawyer on the panel?
Yeah. And I reviewed this, and I think she's going to lose. Yeah. I don't really understand her legal theory behind this, yeah. and frankly, any lawyer, even the best lawyer, even the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, and that's basically what these facts are.
Well, it is rather extraordinary when you think about it. Here you have the state's top judge. She's not suing based on any state law, any state statute, any provision of the state constitution. She runs to the federal court to say that she has a constitutional property right in her job as Chief Justice?
Exactly, and somehow that the voters were cheated out of her full services because they've taken this right away from her, and somehow that would have affected the vote.
Colin Roth.
It's an amazing moment, and it really crystallizes the dysfunction on the court and where that stems from. And let's be honest, nothing instills confidence in your colleagues like suing them to be their chief. I mean, come on.
Okay, Linda Bruin.
Well, I actually looked at some of the lawsuit, and there are a couple of points that if she sued in state court, even though I'm not an attorney, she might have had more leg to stand. For example, in Wisconsin, we don't change elected officers' salaries midterm. But she would have had to go on to state court over that versus federal court. She had to do the constitutional argument, and I think that's where she fails. And I also think that some of her other arguments are very childish and pedantic, including one that said that she never would have run for justice in 2009 if she thought she might not be chief judge. I mean, how childish is that?
Well, this is, and you're kind of a fan of hers.
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, I mean, I think just step back for a moment and you go, okay, this woman's 81 years old. She's been the Chief Justice for nearly 20 years. She has this long, long career. She has a very strong reputation, in the legal community, and she chooses to go out this way. That's what's really amazing, because you could imagine the alternative scenario, which is to say, all right, I'm disappointed in the election, but I'm not above the Constitution. I'm not above the law. I respect what the voters have said. I respect what my colleagues said. And go off and, with a little bit of graciousness, and people would have applauded, and she would have been able to play the victim card with liberals. Instead, it is almost the cliche inside the self-parody of a liberal going, I lost the election, I'm suing.
Can we finally put to rest the notion that it was Justice Prosser or Justice Gableman's fault of the discord in the court? Clearly, she is the epicenter of the discord. Part of the reason why this referendum had such momentum in the first place, it starts and begins with the reign of Queen Shirley above the Constitution, above the will of the voters. It's unfortunate and hopefully not too expensive that this gets resolved.
Well, it's going to cost the taxpayers some money at some point. So what happens now, Colin Roth? Because, now the The amendment will be certified by the end of the month. Then, theoretically, the justices have to decide what to do. What do you expect to happen?
Yeah, there's a lot that could happen. There are rumors that they have to figure out who they're going to decide who the Chief Justice is, and there's rumors that could go with a placeholder like Crooks, who might be up in 16. I think that would be a bad decision.
Yeah. Well, and I think, or they could replace it with another female, Pat Rogensack.
Or will a judge enjoin them from doing it?
Is it well, of course, that's always possible, but is it possible that you could actually have Shirley Abrahamson just refusing to vacate her position?
That's what she's doing now?
Well, that's
Nothing's crazy at this point.
That's crazy at this point. So were you surprised at all by the margin in the Supreme Court election? Because the other vote was you had Ann Walsh Bradley, who won. I thought she was going to win, but I didn't think she was going to get 58% of the vote.
I wasn't surprised because I think a lot of the, frankly, I think there were some Democrats who thought it'd be even wider, that she'd be even higher. But when you look at who turns out in a low turnout election, it's people who have a real interest in changing what's currently there. So I do think that there was more of a conservative bloc going into this.
It was interesting, though, watching the vote. So you had the conservatives who supported the constitutional amendment. They won. So the electorate obviously split their votes. The amendment, which was targeting at the Chief Justice, ran 11 points ahead of Judge Daley. So, I mean, clearly you had a mixed verdict.
Well, even I was kind of agnostic about the referendum. I mean, on its face, there's really nothing to argue about. Let these people elect their own leader. On its face, it's okay. Obviously, everyone saw it as an attack on the status quo. That's why I voted against it. But in terms of the margin for Ann Walsh Bradley, I was amazed. I mean, 16 points. That's twice as much as Walker won by, twice as much as Obama won by in this state.
Well, so. It also shows that you have to run a campaign. You have to run a good campaign. You have to have a good candidate. You have to be on television. What is your glass half full? What is your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Dan Adams, you're first.
Well, my glass is very empty with the sad news that notable attorney and community leader Mark Marotta died this week, way before his time at age 52. My glass is half full because Mark serves as a role model for a life well lived. From Marquette's basketball courts, Harvard Law School, the top levels of government and law, Mark mentored, befriended, and left every situation he encountered better than he found it. Thank you, Mark.
Colin Roth.
My glass is half full this week because our country marks the 150th anniversary of the surrender of General Lee's army at Appomattox and the end of the Civil War. It's half empty because our country doesn't seem interested in marking this day with a national holiday to honor the immense sacrifices it took to keep the Republic whole. Our history matters.
Linda Bruin.
My glass is half full because last Wednesday a jury found one Tsarnaev brother guilty for his role in the Boston Marathon bombing. But my glass is half empty because on the very same day, Madison's Joshua Van Haften was arrested for trying to become an ISIS terrorist.
Brian Fraley.
Yeah, a recall signer, by the way. My glass is half full because business at Edge messaging is good. And yes, I am building that, but the glass is half empty because, well, as Charlie said to start the show, taxes are due on Wednesday and taxes remain too high.
Well, my glass is half full because the Badger men's basketball team had a fantastic run, the best in school history. It's half empty because they fell just short in the championship game, and the refs blew that crucial call right near the end of the game, but I'm not going to obsess about it. Yes, I am. Next on Sunday Insight, the Big Bucks proposal for a new arena and entertainment complex in downtown Milwaukee. The images are spectacular. The price tag around $1 billion. Last week, the Bucks unveiled their vision, not just an arena, but a whole entertainment district in downtown Milwaukee with bars, restaurants, plazas, apartments, maybe even a new hotel. And at the center of it all, of course, a $500 million, 700,000 square foot arena that would seat 17,000 and serve as the catalyst for another $500 million in private development. The hang-ups, still no clear answer how all of this is going to be paid for. What was your reaction when you saw the pretty pictures?
I think my biggest reaction was when Wes Edens described this project as a good deal for the public because it was 50% going to be paid for by the public and 50% by the private sector. And to me, that scenario is off. The public should be paying for less than this. And until they fix it, I don't care as much about whether it's going to have the biggest outdoor bar in Wisconsin or whatever. I think the funding is crucial.
The math, though, because the 500 is private development. The arena is about half and half, right? So it would be, the public share would be about a quarter, wouldn't it?
Well, I think he was he was talking about the arena piece, and so that part to me is still skewed in the wrong direction for the taxpayers. But then you have this bigger piece about the expanded development. I think in theory that's a very exciting part of it. The problem is, where, how solid are those projections?
Well,
how realistic are they?
Okay, how realistic are those projections, Colin Roth?
I just don't know at this point.
Yeah,
I mean, the pictures were spectacular. You mentioned that, but we got no closer this week to finding out how much this is going to cost. We saw no real leadership from the mayor or the county level, and it's still we're seeing them hold their fire in Madison, but we're still not hearing much support.
Okay.
Well, the whole thing is really exciting to have these guys from the East Coast, people who are strangers, frankly, to Milwaukee, have such buy-in and enthusiasm for downtown is exciting. I agree with Colin. We need to see what the actual details are before we conclude.
But the clock is running on this. It's the middle of April.
And this was
the budget may be done by the end of May.
This was a warm and fuzzy media day to try to fill the gap between.
Warm and fuzzy. Where was the mayor? Where were the owners? Nobody was there. No decision maker was at this event.
And so maybe they were trying to take the pressure off of them so they can actually make a deal and bring us something good.
Okay, Brian Fraley.
It's like trotting out pictures. This is my new vacation home. Isn't it great? How am I going to pay for it? I have no idea. I know this is where I want to locate it, even though I don't own the land. I think there could be some competitive pressure here, though, with neighboring communities. Why does this have to be in downtown Milwaukee?
I think that's an excellent question. I floated that on my radio show. I mean, really, at this point, if in fact Mayor Barrett is going to continue sitting on the sidelines and he's not going to come up with a significant contribution, and the state is going to do the heavy lifting, why not Waukesha County? Why not, Pabst Farms? Why not? Kenosha has a huge vacant property that they wanted to build the casino on. Why not make that a location?
As long as the Milwaukee mayor is sitting on his hands, why not?
Okay, well, seriously, you're smiling, but okay. I am one of these East Coast billionaires. I have a choice. I get to deal with Milwaukee County's dysfunctional county board, or I get to deal with Waukesha County. Who do I want to deal with, Waukesha or Milwaukee County?
That's a loaded question. In terms of who I would rather deal with on the personnel side, I'll equip it on that. But you want to be downtown. This is the commercial hub of the entire state.
So you want to be close to that mall?
This is the population center of the state, and it's going to happen here. And with the Couture development and the Northwestern Mutual development, downtown is becoming just tremendous.
I think the biggest value of that point is the pressure it puts on the city of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County to come to the table. The reality is you're not going to have an arena built out in Waukesha or in Outagamie County or whatever, because the economic or wherever, but the economics of it just don't work.
Where do you think the Buck season ticket holders live? You think they live within 2 miles of downtown
that
Milwaukee?
I agree with.
Or do you think they live in Waukesha County?
On Friday, I texted the newly elected county executive in Waukesha County, Paul Farrow, and I said, would you be willing to meet with the Bucks owners if they wanted to talk to you? And he said, absolutely.
So they'll have a public finance aspect?
Well, I guess you look at the location, you look at the population center, and as Brian points out, you look at where the epicenter of the people who are the season ticket holders. It is not a crazy idea, and I think what's been happening is that people just been assuming, of course it's going to have to be downtown, but as the longer this goes on and the more the power center shifts to the legislature rather than local leaders, I think at least let's have a little bit of competition. Now, you may not want to hear it, but we will tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Dan Adams, you're first.
My advice is to Assemblyman Josh Zepnick, who wants to be Milwaukee's next Southside alderman. Josh, if you're serious about being an alder, stop disparaging your district as unsafe and treating small businesses as piñatas to bash for political gain.
Colin Roth.
This week, some of our friends on the left couldn't even enjoy the Badger tournament run without tweets and press releases about UW budget cuts and Scott Walker. My advice: don't make every single thing in life about politics. It's exhausting.
Linda Bruin.
3 members of the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands are embroiled in bitter infighting that has spilled over into decisions being made for personal and political retribution. This is not a good track record for trusting them to handle the bonding for a new Bucks arena.
Brian Fraley.
Okay, to lawmakers in Madison, now is not the time to go wobbly, Republicans. Don't tinker. The prevailing wage law should be repealed, not revised.
Well, Congresswoman Gwen Moore's son, formerly known as Supreme Solar Allah, was elected to the Milwaukee County Board last week. My belated unsolicited advice, as Brian Fraley said on my radio show last Friday, his opponent should have run on the slogan, /taxes, not tires. Look it up. Next on Sunday Insight, who will pay the price for the budget cuts at the University of Wisconsin? UW sticks it to the kids, or at least the kids from out of state. UW Chancellor Deborah Blank wanted to boost the tuition for out-of-state graduates by $10,000 over the next 4 years. Blank sought tuition increases for UW-Madison ranging from 9 to 20% for non-resident undergrads to graduate degree programs and professional schools. Under the proposal, out-of-state undergraduate tuition would reach more than $35,000 a year in 4 years, still about $6,000 less than what the University of Michigan charges out-of-staters. This was approved by the full Board of Regents on Friday. Your reaction, Colin Roth?
This is amazing. Haven't we been trying to engender this conversation about student loan debt? And here we are talking about jacking up prices for students who are out of state, and eventually we'll jack up prices for students who are in state. This is something in which, if we're going to be talking about cuts, and we're looking at flexibility, we need to talk about administrative bloat. We need to talk about merging and closing campuses.
Okay, really a 35% increase for undergraduates at the UW. Your reaction, Dan?
Yeah,
Adams,
soaking the coasties,
right.
as we call it. I've got a mixed view of this. I agree with Colin.
Yeah.
Let's look for some efficiencies here to try to make the system better and more efficient. But two, we are having this huge debate about student loan debt. I have student loan debt. My wife has student loan debt. I'm sure Colin does as well. You know, this is a huge issue for millennials. Democrats
and what drives the debt
is the cost.
It is the cost.
Absolutely.
And I didn't have a chance to check this before we taped, but I'm guessing that a 35% increase over 4 years, that's probably the largest tuition increase of any university in the country at a time when there is this huge debate about the cost. Brian Fraley.
It's shameful, and it probably strikes the death knell of giving the UW Regents authority and the UW campuses authority to govern themselves, because they can't be trusted.
I have to do a comment that I'm a University of Michigan Ann Arbor graduate,
right.
But using that as a comparison is not an equal comparison. The reality is, nationally, University of Michigan Ann Arbor is better known than UW-Madison, and I think that they're hurting themselves by jacking up those prices so high, because I think what will happen is those coastie students will go more to Michigan and other schools than they will Madison.
I think what was most offensive, as Colin pointed out, you have all this administrative bloat, you have all of these expenses and everything, and the first thing they do is they go after the students, and this from a chancellor who actually has bragged about how she uses lower teaching loads as a recruiting tool for professors. What is it you don't get this week? Let's go around the table. Dan Adams.
Charlie, I don't get how the Shepherd Express, side note, if you haven't trained a puppy lately, you may not know this paper still exists, ran an article this week describing me as a conservative pundit on this show. Really? Really?
You never know what's going to happen. Colin Roth.
What I don't get is how Scott Walker and Republicans get labeled anti-women when Walker signed two new bills this week that build on their already robust efforts to protect victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. This is certainly more pro-women than anything that comes out of Planned Parenthood's legislative playbook.
Linda Bruin.
We Wisconsinites staunchly defend our voting rights and worry that our rights might be negated by others committing voter fraud. So what I don't get is why 82% of our state's eligible voters essentially gave their votes to others by not voting on April 7th.
Brian Fraley.
Because unlike what the president wants, it's not mandatory. What I don't get is why people on Milwaukee's north side aren't more outraged by the water in their basements. As Mayor Barrett sets course to spend buttloads of tax dollars to offset streetcar losses, those combined sewers continue to soak you in more ways than one. That stinks.
Well, what I don't get is why anybody would still want to give the University of Wisconsin system more autonomy after they just jacked up tuition by more than 35% for out-of-state undergraduates. Trust these guys with more power? Forget it. Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. First, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Dan Adams, you're first.
My winners, those who campaigned this April as earnest centrist candidates ready to tackle the tasks at hand. Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Ann Walsh Bradley both rejected running as hackneyed partisans and beat those who did. My loser, Rolling Stone magazine, who's refusing to fire a single staffer involved in their UVA hoax rape story scandal, which ruined innocent reputations and harmed actual victims across the country. Heads should roll.
Colin Roth.
My winner this week is University of Michigan football coach Jim Harbaugh, who stood up to the fragile little snowflakes on campus offended by the showing of American Sniper. Great move. My losers are those on the pro-abortion left who are smearing Senator Ron Johnson for allegedly blocking human trafficking bill in the Senate. It's a lie. Johnson voted for the bill, and it is Democrats who are filibustering to push an extreme agenda.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my winner is also Jon Stewart for being outraged that the Rolling Stone staff responsible for the magazine's gang rape on campus story were allowed to keep their jobs. Thanks to this flawed story, the credibility of all sexual assault victims has been undermined. The staff should be fired. My loser is Michael Slager, the police officer charged with murder for killing Walter Scott during a traffic stop for a broken taillight. An amateur video showed the officer shooting the unarmed and fleeing man multiple times in the back and failing to attempt to do CPR. How appalling.
Brian Fraley.
My winners this week are everyone involved with the Wisconsin Badgers men's basketball program. As a proud UW alum, your success on the court and the fun you had off of it made March wonderful. I will always blame the refs, not you, for April. The NCAA officials are my losers. No amount of replay is going to change that.
Well, my winner, again, it has to be the Badgers, Big Ten champs, back to the Final Four for 2 straight years. First national championship game since 1941, and on top of that, a class act from top to bottom. Loser, Shirley Abrahamson, who could have gone out graciously, but decided to bitterly cling to power and perks. Her lawsuit adds to the dysfunction of her own court and will tarnish both her memory and her legacy, plus she's going to lose. Thanks for joining us. Join me for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.